All right, get ready because today we're taking a deep dive into effective communication. But don't worry, we're skipping the boring lectures today. We're all about those aha moments here.
Sounds good to me.
So, you know those team meetings where confusion takes over and everyone's getting frustrated?
Oh, yeah, been there.
Well, think of this deep dive as your toolkit to avoid that communication chaos. And honestly, some of these insights you might not see coming, like, did you know body language can actually speak louder than words?
It's true.
We're going to unlock those secrets to truly confident communication, so let's get started.
You know, it's funny, right? We think of communication as this super simple thing, but when you really get into it, it's
Yeah.
actually pretty complex.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not just about talking, it's about really creating understanding. And that means listening, processing, and then responding in a way that makes a real connection. And today, we're going way past the basics.
Okay, so we're ditching communication 101 then. I mean, we all know listening is important, but what about taking it to the next level? What are those techniques that really make those master communicators stand out?
Well, you mentioned active listening earlier.
Right.
A lot of people think it's just about paraphrasing what someone said, which is important, don't get me wrong. But there's this technique called mirroring that takes it a step further.
Okay, I'm listening.
Mirroring is about reflecting back not just the words, but like the emotions behind them.
Oh, interesting.
So let's say instead of saying, it sounds like you're frustrated with this project, you might say, I can hear the frustration in your voice when you talk about this project. What's causing the most stress?
I see, yeah.
It's a small change, but it can make a really big difference.
That's fascinating. It's like you're really acknowledging how they feel on a deeper level, and it gives them space to actually open up more.
Exactly.
I can see how that would build trust and make people feel more comfortable. But it's not just about listening, is it? We have to get good at delivering our own message clearly and, getting to the point. I guess that's where conciseness comes in.
Exactly. But it's not just about keeping things short. It's about making them impactful.
I like that.
So think about giving a presentation. You could try to cram in every little detail, or you could focus on those key takeaways that your audience is really going to remember.
Right. Yeah, right.
It's like a sculptor chipping away all the extra stone to reveal a powerful shape. That's what concise communication is all about.
I love that analogy. It's like you're shaping your message with purpose, choosing each word super carefully to get the most impact. But even with the perfect words, sometimes things can still get lost in translation, can't they? Especially when you throw in all those nonverbal cues.
You're absolutely right. Nonverbal cues can completely change how your message comes across.
Yeah, for sure.
We usually focus on the obvious stuff like eye contact and how we're standing.
Right.
But have you ever heard of proxemics?
Proxemics? I'm not really.
It's basically how physical space affects communication.
Oh,
Standing too close can feel kind of invasive, but being too far away can seem like you're not interested. It's like there's a secret conversation happening alongside your words.
wow. Proxemics. That's a new one for me. It really makes you think about how much we communicate without even realizing it.
Absolutely.
It's like our bodies are always sending out these little signals. But even with the best words and the right body language, things can still go wrong if we're not paying attention to emotions, right?
You're hitting on something super important there. Emotional intelligence is crucial. It's the ability to not just recognize your own emotions, but to really understand other people's emotions too. Think of it as the bridge between logic and empathy.
So it's not just what you say, it's how you say it and how you make the other person feel.
Exactly.
Like if someone is already stressed out, throwing a bunch of information at them might not be the best way to go, even if it makes sense logically.
You got it. Emotional intelligence is about knowing how to read the room. It's about adjusting your style to meet people where they are emotionally. A great example is a leader who knows how to inspire their team.
Okay.
They don't just give orders, they connect with their team on an emotional level, understanding what motivates them and what they want to achieve. It's all about building trust and rapport, which are essential for effective communication.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like emotional intelligence is that secret ingredient that makes communication really hit home. But speaking of leadership, isn't there a fine line between being emotionally intelligent and coming across as, well, too soft? Don't we need a good dose of confidence and assertiveness too to get our message across?
You're right. It's about finding that sweet spot. Confidence isn't about being arrogant. It's about believing in yourself and what you have to say. And being assertive means standing up for your needs and opinions while still respecting the other person. Let's say you're in a salary negotiation. You can be confident about what you're worth and clearly explain what you expect without being aggressive or demanding.
So it's about being firm but fair, not letting people walk all over you, but not walking all over them either.
Exactly.
Okay, this all sounds great in theory, but let's be real. Communication in the real world is messy. There are always going to be misunderstandings, no matter how good we get at it. What are some of those common roadblocks that trip people up?
Sometimes it's something as simple as distractions.
Oh, yeah.
Our phones, our to-do lists, all these things can pull our attention away from the person we're talking to. And then you have cultural differences.
Right.
What's considered polite in one culture might be totally different in another. It's important to be aware of those nuances so you don't accidentally offend someone or create a misunderstanding.
It's like you need to become a communication chameleon, always adjusting your approach, depending on who you're with. But even with good intentions, those barriers can still pop up, can't they?
Absolutely. That's why you need strategies for navigating those challenges. For instance, let's say you're working with a team from a different culture. Visual aids can be really helpful. Or using simpler language, maybe even adding a little bit of humor, can really help bridge the gap.
That's a great point. It's all about being flexible, finding those creative ways to make sure everyone feels heard and understood. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about things like mirroring, why keeping it concise is important, those subtle power plays of nonverbal communication like proxemics, the crucial role of emotional intelligence, and how to find that balance between confidence and assertiveness.
It's a lot.
We even started unpacking some of the barriers that can mess up even the best communication attempts. But this is just the beginning of our deep dive, right?
Exactly. We've laid the groundwork and explored the essentials. Now it's time to really get into how we can use all this in real life. How can these skills help us build stronger relationships, navigate conflict, and reach our goals?
That's what I want to know.
That's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive on effective communication. Man, my brain is still buzzing from that first part. We uncovered some seriously valuable communication stuff. But now I'm wondering, how does all this actually translate into real results? Does mastering these skills really make a difference in our lives?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's what makes this whole thing so interesting. It's not just some theory in a textbook.
Yeah.
Effective communication has this ripple effect. It impacts everything, how we work, our relationships, even how we feel about ourselves.
Okay, I'm with you. So let's start with the workplace. I can imagine a team that's really nailed effective communication. They're probably like a well-oiled machine. But what does that actually look like day to day?
Well, think about that super chaotic team meeting we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Now, imagine that same team, but this time they have all these tools we've been discussing. They're actively listening. They're using that mirroring technique to understand where each other is coming from. When conflicts come up, they're able to say what they need clearly, but still respectfully. And instead of just throwing information around, they're focused on making things clear and impactful.
So it's less about individual superstars and more about everyone working together, right? Everyone's bringing their best because they feel heard and understood.
Exactly. And that translates into real results. Studies have actually shown that companies with strong communication cultures, they have happier employees, they get more done, and they even perform better financially. It's not just about feeling good, it's about achieving more as a team.
That makes total sense. When communication breaks down, you get all those bottlenecks, delays, and frustration. But when it's flowing smoothly, it's like this superpower that makes everyone's efforts even stronger.
You got it. And it's not just at work either. Think about your personal relationships. How often do arguments start because of misunderstandings or not being able to express what we need?
Oh man, all the time. Especially with the people closest to us. It's like we just assume they should get us, even if we're not being clear about what we need or how we feel.
It's a trap we all fall into. But when we use these communication skills in our personal lives, it can totally change our relationships. Imagine you're having a disagreement with your partner, but instead of getting defensive, you use active listening to really get where they're coming from. And then you explain your needs clearly and respectfully, but with empathy. You're not always going to agree, but it builds respect and understanding.
Yeah, it's like you're shifting from this battleground to a place where you're both working together. The goal isn't to win the argument, but to find a solution that works for both of you.
Exactly. That's what effective communication is all about. It's about building bridges, connecting with people, and finding those win-win situations. And this goes way beyond romantic relationships. Think about your family, your friends, even how you interact with strangers.
I'm starting to see how it's less about learning specific tricks and more about changing your mindset, right? It's like going into every interaction with the intention of really connecting, even if it's just for a short time.
You're totally right. It's about being present, being thoughtful about what you say and do, and realizing that every interaction is a chance to communicate well.
Okay, so we've seen how mastering communication can transform teams, relationships, even those everyday interactions. But the notes for this episode mention something even bigger. It describes effective communication as a superpower that can unlock success in literally every area of life. How so?
Well, think about it. Whether you're closing a business deal, asking for a raise, or even just trying to convince your kids to eat their vegetables, effective communication is the key.
It's about influencing, persuading, inspiring. But doesn't that get into a bit of a gray area? What about when people use persuasion for bad reasons? I mean, communication can be used as a weapon too, right?
You bring up a really important point, and that's why being ethical is so crucial. It's like any powerful tool, it can be used for good or bad. The key is being aware of how our words can affect others and using our communication skills responsibly.
So it's not just about being effective, it's about being a good person too.
Yeah.
It's using that communication superpower to help others, not to manipulate or control them.
You got it. It's about building trust, helping people understand each other, and having a positive impact on the world.
Okay, so we've talked about how effective communication can change our work, our relationships, even our ability to influence and persuade. But let's bring it back to our listener. What's the one big takeaway we want them to remember?
I think it's this. Effective communication isn't something you achieve, it's an ongoing process. It's a skill we can keep developing throughout our lives. And even small improvements can make a big difference, creating positive change in all areas of our lives.
So it's not about being perfect, it's about making a conscious effort. It's about really trying to listen better, speak more clearly, and connect with people authentically. But where do we even start? It all seems kind of overwhelming.
That's actually the beauty of it. There are so many ways to get better at communication. We can read books, take courses, practice with friends, even just pay attention to how we communicate in everyday situations. The key is to find what works for you and make it a habit.
So it's less about following some rigid formula and more about finding your own style, right? It's about experimenting and seeing what works for you. But I can't help but wonder, are some people just born better communicators than others? Is there like a genetic component to this?
While some people might naturally gravitate towards certain communication styles, research shows that anyone can improve their communication skills with effort and practice. It's like learning a new language or playing a musical instrument. It takes dedication and sticking with it, but the payoff is huge.
So it's not about talent, it's about commitment. And that's really empowering, isn't it? It means we're not stuck with the communication habits we've always had. We can choose to become better communicators, and in doing so, transform our lives and the lives of those around us.
Exactly. And that leads us to a really important point. It's not just about what we say, it's also about how we receive communication from others. Are we truly listening, or are we just waiting for our turn to talk? Are we coming into conversations with curiosity and an open mind, or are we letting our own biases get in the way? These are all critical parts of becoming a more effective communicator.
You're so right. It's like we need to develop a communication mindset, a way of being that values being real, being empathetic, and making genuine connections.
Precisely. And that's something we can all work on no matter how good our communication skills are right now. It's a journey of self-discovery, of learning to understand ourselves and others on a deeper level.
So, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. We've looked at how effective communication can improve our work, our relationships, even our ability to influence others. But more importantly, we've explored the idea that becoming a better communicator is a journey, not a destination. It's about continuous growth, being aware of ourselves, and being committed to using our communication skills for good. But there's still more to uncover, right?
You bet. In the last part of our deep dive, we'll get into some practical tips and strategies you can start using today to boost your communication skills. We'll also delve into the amazing power of storytelling and how it can take your communication to a whole new level.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into effective communication. It's been quite a journey, right? We've explored so much, the building blocks, those pesky barriers, the impact, and even the ethics of it all. I feel like we've struck gold with all this communication wisdom.
We have. And I'm excited for this last part, where we equip you with some practical tools you can actually start using today to become even better communicators. But before we dive into those specifics, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier, the power of storytelling. It's something people often forget in traditional communication advice, but it's incredibly strong.
Oh, I'm definitely interested in that. I love a good story, and I've noticed how stories can really grab an audience in a way that just facts and figures can't. But how does storytelling actually fit into effective communication?
Well, think about it. Our brains are hardwired for stories.
Yeah, that's true.
They help us understand the world around us, they help us connect with others on an emotional level, and they make it way easier to remember information. So when you weave stories into what you're saying, you're tapping into something really primal and powerful.
So it's not just about giving facts and figures, it's about creating a narrative that people can really connect with. But how do we actually do that? Do we need to suddenly become novelists or screenwriters?
No, no, not at all. It can be as simple as adding little anecdotes to your presentations, or using metaphors to explain complicated ideas. You can even share personal stories to connect with your audience on a deeper level. Let's say you're trying to get your team on board with a new strategy. Instead of just listing the benefits, you can tell a story about a company that used a similar approach and the amazing results they got.
I get it. So you're making those abstract ideas come to life, making them relatable and memorable through the power of a good story. That makes a lot of sense. And it doesn't seem as daunting as I first thought.
Exactly. And storytelling is a skill anyone can get better at with practice. The great thing is you can adapt it to any situation, from casual conversations to big presentations. But storytelling aside, there are tons of other practical tips and techniques to up your communication game. One simple, but often overlooked tip is to just pause before you speak.
Oh, yeah, I've been trying to be more mindful of that, especially when things get heated. That pause can make a world of difference.
Right. It gives you a moment to really think about what you want to say, choose your words carefully, and avoid saying something you'll regret later.
Totally. It helps you respond instead of just reacting.
Exactly. And another powerful technique is to ask open-ended questions. Instead of those yes-no questions that shut down the conversation, ask questions that encourage the other person to elaborate and share their thoughts. It makes them feel heard.
I love that. It shifts the focus from just getting information to having a real dialogue. It's like you're inviting them to be a part of the conversation, to create it with you. And that would naturally lead to more understanding and connection, wouldn't it?
You nailed it. And it's a skill you can use anywhere, from personal relationships to tough negotiations. But let's not forget about nonverbal communication. We talked about proxemics, but there's so much more to it. Did you know that mirroring someone's body language can actually help you build rapport and trust? It subtly shows them you're on the same page.
Mirroring body language. That's really interesting. So if someone leans forward, I should kind of subtly lean forward too, almost like a connection dance. But I bet there's a fine line between mirroring and just straight up copying, right? Don't want to freak anyone out.
You're right. You have to be subtle about it. It's about those unconscious reflections, not mimicking every move. And it's just one of many nonverbal cues that can improve your communication. Holding eye contact, using open gestures, even changing your tone of voice can all make a huge difference in how people receive your message.
It's like our bodies are having their own conversation along with our words. And learning to use that language well can take communication to a whole new level.
Absolutely.
Right.
But here's the key. Effective communication isn't about memorizing a bunch of tricks or turning into some kind of communication robot. It's about bringing your true self to every conversation, being present, being thoughtful, and genuinely caring about the other person.
That really hits home for me. It's about that heart-to-heart connection, not just exchanging information from head to head. And that's what makes communication so powerful and meaningful.
Perfectly said. So, to wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. Effective communication is a lifelong journey. It's about always learning, always reflecting, and always striving to use our communication skills to create a more connected and compassionate world.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think it's the perfect way to end. Remember, every single conversation, every interaction is a chance to practice, to get better, and to make a positive difference. So go out there and communicate with intention, with empathy, and with your whole heart.
And never stop learning. There's always more to discover in the fascinating world of human communication.
That's a wrap on our deep dive into effective communication. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and practical tips to become an even better communicator. Until next time, keep those communication channels open and keep those conversations